Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttle with HurricaneTrack.com here with your hurricane outlook and discussion. As promised, I have a new title card ready to go, a new graphic there, updated. And most of you probably know what hurricane that is. It's Hurricane Harvey from 2017. That'll be this year's featured background image for the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion title card. My contact information is on there. Or at least most of it, my social media, at HurricaneTrack, YouTube. Those are my two most prominent social media presences, if you will. HurricaneTrack on Twitter and YouTube. Everything's HurricaneTrack. Yes, I'm on Facebook and Instagram. It's all HurricaneTrack, just like it's spelled right there. Hurricane, T-R-A-C-K. And then, of course, we are supported by our patrons on Patreon. The world of crowdfunding allows me to do this, so there you go. Here we are. All right, so it's May 14th, 2020, and things are starting to get busy. This isn't updating as often as I was hoping that it would. Maybe people being absent because of the pandemic. I don't know. But we do have an invest area right here. It's not showing up on this particular map, but we now have 90L. And we will talk about what a 90L is in just a moment. And of course we have our Typhoon over here that made landfall last night in the Philippines. And we are really going to be watching the Bay of Bengal over here over the next several days. And then before you know it, it's going to officially be hurricane season. You know, the Eastern Pacific hurricane season over here, that begins officially tomorrow. But unofficially, I think the Atlantic hurricane season is going to get started by the weekend. Mother Nature does not care. I think we've pretty much learned that for 2020. We'll start off with a quick look at the Typhoon Vong Fong or Ambo or whatever it was called that made landfall yesterday. Not a terrible, horrible event. Freshwater flooding, wind, storm surge. I mean, they are used to it over there. That doesn't mean that they welcome them. Maybe some people do. As long as they don't get out of control where you get like 150, 170, 180 like Haiyan or Yolanda. You remember, and that's how, by the way, let me just throw this in. Isn't it interesting how for the West Pacific there's two sets of names if it's approaching the Philippines? First you get the international name, and then when it approaches the Philippines area of responsibility, you get the local name. So Haiyan was the international name, and Yolanda, PH for Philippines, was the local name, just so you know. So this was Vong Fong or something like that. And then it was like Ambo or whatever for the local name, I believe. And this, by the way, is a beautiful satellite animation from the Himawari infrared. This comes to us from weathernerds.org. They are also on Patreon. See that right there? I'm clicking over it or mousing over it. All kinds of good stuff being supported by crowdfunding. It's awesome. Anyhow, thanks to all of you that support them, we're able to use this satellite animation, and you can see that it's fallen apart over the rugged, volcanic, in some cases, terrain of the Philippines. Still a big, heavy rainmaker event. And we know that they can certainly be worse than this, but there you go. It'll slowly move its way up, generally speaking, in this direction over the next few days, and eventually get back out into the open ocean. And all of this heat that's associated with it, and that's what this is, all this condensation that you see. Quick meteorological lesson for you. Condensation is a warming process. Evaporation is the opposite. It's a cooling process. So all that condensation that you see there is releasing heat into the atmosphere by pulling it out of the ocean. And it's not necessarily that tropical cyclones move heat from the tropics to the higher latitudes so much as they take the heat out of the ocean and kind of redistribute it that way. It's very complex, more to do with thermodynamics than just the simple moving heat from one location to another. What all this means, though, is, and this is where we're going to have to watch down the road, you know that word teleconnection? That's another meteorological term. We hear people like Ben Knoll talk about that, or Michael Ventris, Joe Bastardi, some of these people that look at long-range weather forecasting. These typhoons, when they curve into the westerlies, or people call it recurving, with all of that heat energy, that it kind of sends a cattle prod into the jet stream. And so interesting things start to happen. We'll watch for that. And the energy from these sometimes ends up in the Western Hemisphere and over parts of North America. So just because they make landfall and start to peter out somewhat in the Philippines or Japan or elsewhere doesn't mean that we are always done with them. All right, moving on now to the Atlantic Basin, where we will probably get our first named storm of the season. This is Invest area 90L down in the Florida Straits. Who saw that coming? I thought it was going to kind of get it start more in the Bahamas, but there it is down in the Florida Straits. Kind of a nasty day down there. Gusty winds from time to time. Not very pleasant, not very good boating weather. Anyway, the National Hurricane Center is showing about an 80% chance overall over the next several days that this could become a subtropical, a tropical or subtropical storm. And that's interesting. And let's just click on this so we can get the text to come up. That they actually now mention it specifically. Environmental conditions are expected to become conducive for development, and this system is likely to become a tropical or subtropical storm by late Friday or Saturday. Now, what does that mean? And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I try to teach you stuff, especially if you're relatively new, or maybe you're brand new to my channel, to hurricanes in general, you just want to know more. So a tropical cyclone or a tropical storm or a hurricane, the wind energy is much more concentrated around that center. It's better organized, more focused, whereas the subtropical storms are kind of, as I've said before, a hybrid or a mutt, kind of a mix between mid-latitude storm systems and your true tropical cyclones. The wind energy is spread out over a larger area. They're a little bit more disheveled, but sometimes they can become more concentrated and transition all the way over to a fully tropical system. That's the easy way to explain it. There's more meteorology to it than that. The thermal profile, other things that we're not going to get into today. But just think of a subtropical storm as a mix, a hybrid of kind of your tropical systems and your mid-latitude storm systems. And it just so happens that the meteorological community refers to these as subtropical storms as opposed to just a hybrid storm. So there you go. The effects are generally the same, but the wind field is usually larger and spread out over a larger area. But it's just interesting that the word tropical is getting put in there, and that means that it would just be more warm core, more traditional concentrated tropical storm, and we'll wait and see. But there's the area of interest, and if we look at the graphical part, that's the development area. And so you folks down here in southeast Florida are having and will have impacts from this. Heavy rain from time to time, the rain bands. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the weather.gov site, and we'll take a look at national radar while I'm at it. I just kind of thought of that. That will do feedback later. Thank you very much. So here's the southeast United States. You know what? I like this big giant one better. There we go. Huge high-resolution radar map. I love it. Of the whole country. So here it is down in southeast Florida. That's 90L right there. That's the invest area, 90L. Some spiral nature to it overall. Kind of a wet day, like I mentioned, not good for small craft, but not anything to worry about in terms of rapid development. It's not August or September. Water temperatures are not in the upper 80s and all that good stuff and other parameters that you would need for rapid development. That being said, it is a weather system that can bring hazards, and so just respect that. You wouldn't look at a baby rattlesnake and say, no big deal if that bites me, it's just a baby. You would still treat a baby rattlesnake the same as you would a large rattlesnake. And I know probably most of you are going to say, yep, I'd kill it. Well, that's a story for another day. You can't kill tropical storms, but I'm just saying, even though it's not a big hurricane with 80-mile-an-hour winds, it can still cause problems. I'm just trying to keep you guys safe. All right, so I like this map. I've talked about this a lot, this particular graphical product. This shows us how the vorticity or the energy is coming together or not. And in this case, I find this very intriguing. There it is right there, kind of oval shaped. It's not all stretched out like this out here. or this over the Great Plains as an example. That's also energy and vorticity in the atmosphere, but it's being pulled apart. It's more linear than focused around a common center, like we are seeing developing down there with our invest area 90L. Now, real quick, why do they call it 90L? Well, the Hurricane Center has this labeling system. The numbers 90 through 99 are used when you have a suspect area. It triggers different mechanisms, maybe more resources, satellite recon, computer modeling, etc. And the L is part of the word Atlantic. In fact, it's technically AL90 or 90AL, whichever you want to look at it. We just, in the weather nerd world, call it L for short, 90L. So the next one will be 91L, and we use them again, probably going to go through it a few times this year. Eastern Pacific winds are called E, so like 91E or 99E or whatever, and we go back and we use 90 through 99. It's just a way to say it's an area of interest instead of just calling everything an area of interest. It's just a way to keep up with stuff, all right? All right. Pretty soon, everybody's going to know that, and it'll basically be common knowledge. So there it is. It's trying to come together down there around Cuba and the Florida Straits. This is what it looks like. From Levi Cowan's website, tropicaltidbits.com, there's the system there. High pressure building out over the Atlantic and lower pressures down here. Other thermodynamic processes and all kinds of magic going on in the atmosphere and the ocean that we are more than likely now going to get our first named storm, again, for the 6th year in a row. It looks like that's going to happen. But look at what else is going on. Notice how much, and let's use the big highlighter here, of the energy in this satellite photograph is stretching off from southwest to northeast. Lots and lots of shear. The net motion of just about everything is still from west to east. You see? And so it's just not quite time yet. Duh. I mean, we know that. May is not typically a busy month for hurricanes. Yeah, we get these hybrid tropical storms, subtropical storms, whatever, but we don't get a lot of hurricanes in May. And that's a good argument for not making hurricane season start in May. Tropical cyclone season, okay, I could see that. But if you're talking specifically hurricanes, those typically start to ramp up in June through the month of November. These other storms that come along, and yes, they're becoming more common. Until we start seeing them become hurricanes, I'm not going to worry too much about it. And hurricane season, as far as I'm concerned, can start in June like it always has. I thought about it as this was coming up, and there's my reasoning behind it. Just look at all that shear going on. Lots of westerly winds, lots of energy. Yeah, it's not quite... that's why the hurricane season has a beginning, put it that way. You got to start somewhere. One of the starting points would be sea surface temperatures, and where the area is now, 26 Celsius, or about 79.5 Fahrenheit, or 80 if you want to round it up. 24 to 26 Celsius through here. So marginally warm enough. The atmosphere is going to have to lend a hand with what we call baroclinic processes, where heat and other energy sources in the atmosphere, the difference in heat over distance, etc. It gets into some crazy meteorology, but you can get tropical storm and hurricane development over colder water than 80 degrees because the atmosphere supports it more than the ocean really giving it that jolt. You know what I'm saying? And so sometimes, and that's why these subtropical storms are tricky, you do have the atmosphere that gets involved much more so than normal outside of the traditional way that you get hurricanes to develop, and that may be the case here, and this could strengthen, especially if it gets close enough to the Gulf Stream up here, and even up on the Outer Banks in North Carolina, it could become breezy. Probably going to have some rip currents coming in through here. The longshore flow will be disrupted, and surfers are going to like it, for the most part. We talked about that with Shay Gibson yesterday from WeatherFlow. Check your surf line and your surf checks coming up over the next few days. But, seriously, because of this stupid COVID-19, and that doesn't mean I'm diminishing it. I hate the darn thing. It's annoying. I don't like it, so I'm going to call it stupid. I want it to go away. It's kept a lot of people away from the beach. Some are opening, some are not. Some allow you to park, blah, blah, blah. Remember, you go down to the beach and you're like all excited and you got these rough surf conditions because of this. The waves can kill you. The rip currents can kill you. So don't survive this pandemic only to be killed by a stupid rip current. Seriously. Got to be sensible about this stuff. Social distance yourself. I try to chuckle just to keep from banging my head into the table in despair. Try to social distance yourself from the rip currents, will ya? Because I want you here to be able to watch future updates. Without you, there's no reason for me to be here. All right? So it's got some warm water to work with. It's going to move up into this area. And, we'll see. That's still days out. Let's just take it one day at a time. Which leads me very conveniently into the modeling. This is the GFS. 850 millibars in the atmosphere, about 5,000 feet up. If you wanted to look at it that way, there's the nice high pressure area building over the western Atlantic, extending into the southeast United States. We call that ridging. And then right down here is a little perturbation in the height field, and that's the weakness there created by this disturbance. You know how Obi-Wan Kenobi, a disturbance in the force? Well, here you go. This is just a disturbance in the atmospheric force, and that's literal. That's exactly what that is. It's a little kink in the isobar, or the height line in this case, and there's our system trying to come together right there. So these are the initial conditions. We move this out to 24 hours. There's tomorrow. A couple of lobes of energy trying to separate and take over. You're going to see that with these early season messy kind of systems. 48 hours out, it's a little bit better organized. Not far off the coast of Florida. So, the northwest Bahamas, east coast of Florida from, Vero Beach down through Miami. Occasional showers, heavy rain, a few thunderstorms, maybe some water spouts, you never know. Gusty winds from time to time. Just kind of like, weather, Good weather to stay indoors and keep trying to avoid the stupid virus. This is a good excuse to continue to do that, all right? It moves on off by 72 hours. Maybe at this point, if it's close enough to enough warm water, it'll try to concentrate and bundle that energy and become a tropical storm. We'll see. It doesn't matter much, but boy, by 96 hours or so, that looks like in the modeling here, the computer representation, the numerical weather prediction, as it's called, of the simulated 850 millibar chart, that looks pretty good, quote unquote, in terms of what you would think of when you look for these in the modeling. And somebody on YouTube reminded me that we do have simulated satellite pictures that the models do. And I forgot about that and how handy it was to look at that. So that doesn't look very impressive. You see, kind of loosely organized. It's so neat that you can simulate what the clouds would look like. But you see what I mean? It's just kind of like, kind of loosely organized overall, but nevertheless, enough of a problem that there will be hazards here, maybe along the Carolinas, late in the weekend, early next week, but first down here along the Florida coast, northern Cuba, and the northwest Bahamas. So just pay attention to it and just don't write it off as being a non-event. Because if it capsizes your boat, it's not a non-event for you, is it? You understand? All right, Euro, kind of same thing, a little bit less organized overall. It's not as impressed with it. Different model dynamics, different physics. Boy, we could talk for hours about, well, why do they show differences? That's weird. I don't know. It's just the way that models are created. And they're not all going to show the same thing, or we would just need only one model, I guess. I don't know. But the European model, not quite as robust or whatever. So we'll see. This will be an interesting test case between the Euro and the GFS. Now, I want to pay attention to the Bay of Bengal. This is very important. There is a tropical cyclone that's forecast to develop by the computer guidance in this area. We talked about it yesterday. Let's get rid of me. Come on. Bye-bye. 24 hours out. You can see it way down here in the southern portion of the bay. This is Bangladesh up here. And then you get to Myanmar, or it used to be called Burma. And that's up at the head of the Bay of Bengal, and that's a big problem. if something gets up there. 36 to 48 hours, this thing gets ramped up. By 96 hours, full-fledged cyclone moving into this region, and that could be a big problem as it funnels that water all up into the northeast corner here of the Bay of Bengal. Wow. We got to really watch this. This could be a humanitarian nightmare. All right? It's still 6 days out or so, but that looks really ugly coming up, and I'll be paying attention to this a lot. If you know people over there, hey, we got social media, and share it with them. Let them know. I mean, most people are on top of this in today's world with the access to the internet. It's hard to escape it, but just in case, you know. And I heard a couple people on social media yesterday that live in this area. I heard from them. So let's watch this very closely. In terms of the area we're talking about, I'll zoom in on it. It's forecast, again, generally speaking, to come up into here, maybe in this northeast corner. And again, that river delta, yuck, very low-lying, a beautiful area of the world, but not good for tropical cyclones. I've never been there, but I've seen it in many a National Geographic or other nature shows. Nice part of the world, but very vulnerable to storm surge because it's so shallow, and it's easy to pile that water up into the Ganges Delta there at the top of the Bay of Bengal. So pay attention to that. Also, real quick, I don't have many of them left, but there it is, giant poster-size hurricane tracking chart, the 2020 version. Everybody's got apps and computer programs. This is how you do it old school, folks. I got started producing those maps back 20-something years ago, and it led to a whole bunch of other amazing projects. I actually make this map myself. I drew it some 15, 20 years ago in Adobe Illustrator. And I did it for media partners and big corporations. Lowe's was one of them. Sprint, Bank of America, many others. TV stations, radio stations. That map is 28 by 8 or 24 by 18, full color, and I'm selling them. I've only got about 15 left. I produced a bunch of them, about 100 or so, and I've sent them to some of our patrons as part of their Patreon support. And then the leftovers, I'm going to sell some of them, maybe raise a little bit of gas money for the season ahead. But you know what? They're just really cool. Imagine that in your office. I'll put a link to it in the description of today's video. And and I'm only selling 20 of them or something like that. Once they're gone, that's it. And a few people have bought them, and I thank you for that. It helps to, when it goes into PayPal, we literally use that PayPal card at the gas pump when the time comes. And the time is coming. We're going to be doing some testing after Memorial Day out on the Great Plains. We'll talk about that later. But this is the kind of stuff that supports. Seriously. So look at the description in today's video if you want to purchase one of those maps. And you can have one hanging on your wall. All right? All right. Have a great rest of your Thursday. It is Thursday, right? Thursday the 14th. Yes, it is. Whew. All right. I'm done. I am Mark Sudduth. Enjoying that nice graphic again. We'll just look at it for 1 second. Seconds up. Very good. Have a good rest of your Thursday. Thanks as always for watching. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll be back with more for you tomorrow.